before the vacation? And the answer is no. And the next question was, will you review us when we get back? And the answer is yes. But right now, let's look at what you're doing for tomorrow. And this is a fun part because this is about the many things that the Romans achieved. Now, the Greco-Roman civilization started because when the Romans, who were great engineers, but not really that classy and refined at first, they already admired the Greeks, and when they conquered them, they just absorbed many of their ways. In fact, they were so impressed with the Greeks that some of their poets continued to write poems in Greek, and they learned to speak Greek because they had such an admiration for Greece. And it was the historian Horace that said, "Greece has conquered her rude conqueror." What does that mean? Greece has conquered her rude conqueror. Greece has conquered her rude conqueror. Who's the rude conqueror? Rome. Yes.
He's talking about he conquered Rome, but Rome conquered him physically.
Rome conquered them physically, yes. They were the rude conqueror. But Greece conquered them with their culture. They were so impressed with Greece. So that's what that means. Thank you, Shauna. All right, and now you remember the Hellenistic culture that was developed by Alexander's adventures that we studied in the last chapter. That was a combination of the Greeks. Who else made up the Hellenistic culture? All the places he went and fought, he picked up. Greece,
India,
Egypt, India, and the one that fought with Greece in the first Persia. Okay, so did you say Persia? Oh, so sorry. Talk louder. Okay, so the Hellenistic culture had already blended things from Persia, Egypt, and India with the Greek culture. Now, all those were being blended with the Roman culture and called the Greco-Roman. So you can already begin to see the cultural diffusion in the world happening, which is, of course, much greater today. We have a lot more cultural diffusion, but here you can see it happening when the Romans conquered Greece. Let's take a look at some of their literature and philosophy and history. There's a few things I want you to know, and if you want to make a note of it so you can learn it, that's great. First of all, always know any word that's in blue in this text. But I want you to know about Virgil. How many of you have at least heard the name Virgil? Okay, good. I mean, we've heard it. We don't know exactly what it is, but we've heard of it. Virgil was a poet, and part of his goal as a poet was to show how that Rome's past was as heroic and wonderful as Greece's past. He wanted people to know that. And so he wrote a poem called the Aeneid. This is at the bottom of page 137, the Aeneid by Virgil. And in this poem, he linked Rome with the famous works of Homer. You know, everybody admired Homer. Remember, Alexander carried the Odyssey and the Iliad with him everywhere he went. Everyone thought that was just the most heroic history of Greece. And so I think Virgil was a little jealous of that. So he decided to make a story where he could combine Rome's history with this great story of Homer's. And so he made this character, Aeneas. And Aeneas was one who escaped the Trojan War and went to found Rome, to start the city of Rome. So that was his way to connect Rome even more to Greece, because they had admired Greece so much. So Virgil wrote things, and his goal was to make Rome heroic. Now, if you can jot these down, you will be so far ahead in the quiz tomorrow. Number one, Virgil wrote the Aeneid to show that Rome was heroic. If you can know the name of the author and what their goal was, what kind of writing they did. Okay, because what if you had all these authors and you had to match it to, for example, he tried to make Rome look heroic, and you've got like 20 names to choose from. If you don't learn this, you're going to be really frustrated. So Virgil tried to make Rome look heroic. He connected his story to Homer's story. Other poets used satire. One satirist was named Horace, Horace. Horace was kind of playful. He just made fun of people and joked through satire. But there were two guys that were really harsh. Their names were Juvenil and Martial. Let me write those on the board for you. Juvenil and Martial. Now these guys, they wrote criticisms and satires and made fun of Roman society. Did I spell that right? Yeah. And they made fun of Roman society, and one of them was so harsh in his criticisms, Martial, that he had to use a made-up name because he was afraid he'd get in trouble. So these are the poets I want you to know about. Virgil, Horace, Juvenil, and Martial. There's 4 of them. They're all poets. They all had different goals. What was Virgil's goal?
To make Rome look heroic.
To make Rome look heroic. What was Horace's goal?
Like make people laugh.
Yeah, just to make people laugh and make fun of, poke fun at people in society in sort of a playful, witty way. What were Juvenil and Martial's goals?
To attack people.
Yeah, they were kind of trying to show the faults in society. And so they were being a little more careful. Now, there are 2 historians from Rome that are very famous. You remember that Herodotus is the most famous Greek historian. We've talked about Herodotus many times. What word does his name begin with? Hero. Herodotus. And he's from what city? Greece. Okay. So besides knowing those 4 poets, you need to know about these 2 historians, and they're really important, and I think their names help you know what they did. For example, the first one is named Livy, L-I-V-Y. And the thing that is interesting about that name is it's very close. What if you were going to change this into another word by adding a letter or 2, what word would you do? Lively, yeah, it looks, you could think of it as lively. Well, this fits him as a historian because his works were trying to show how great Rome was. He was doing positive things about Rome. He wanted people to be very patriotic and proud of being Roman, so he wrote his histories from the point of view of someone who was very positive about Rome. Tacitus is the other one, Tacitus. And if I was going to change that into a word, it's real obvious what word it would be. How many of you know the word taciturn? Can you tell me what you've heard it, can you tell me what it means? Look it up on your smartphone, somebody, and tell me the definition. Taciturn. Taciturn. Let's get the correct definition. Oh, it was on one of your vocab. So I'm glad you remember the word at least. Was that from Mrs. Heinrich's class?
Reserved or uncommunicative.
What is it? I'm sorry?
Saying like little or reserved in speech. That's
Okay.
what it says here, but
Okay, this person is, when I think of someone who's taciturn, I think of someone just more quiet and reclusive. Is that right? And so he had negative things to say about Rome because what Taciturn tried to do is he tried to be objective. If he felt something was wrong, he wrote it down. His was the more negative view of Rome. So Livy was real lively about Rome. Yay, Rome's the great. And Taciturn quietly watched and said, not everything is perfect. So those are the 2 historians that I want you to be aware of. Now there were many, many emperors because what we're starting here in section 3 is the beginning of the empire. The empire started with, who was the person that everybody fell in love with and followed and wanted to make emperor? Actually, it was Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar, and Julius Caesar, did it tell you about him yet? No. Okay. Julius Caesar was a general along with Pompey, and Julius Caesar was under the orders of the Senate. He had to do what he was told, and he was in a battle, and he was on one side of a river and the enemy was on the other, and he wanted to go attack the enemy. The river was called the Rubicon. And so after pacing up and down all night, he decided to disobey the Senate, go over the Rubicon anyway, and attack his enemy. Wait, because he knew he could get them. And so he became, at that point, an outlaw. Help me remember where we left off tomorrow, and we will continue. Thanks, guys.